Hello, I'm Christy Welch, Direct Food and Agricultural Marketing Specialist with Ohio State University Extension. And with the approach of spring, I thought it would be a good time to take a few minutes to talk about farmers markets as they're going to be opening up around the state in the next few weeks. And I'm sure there are some folks out there thinking about whether selling their product at a farmers market is right for them. So we're going to talk a little bit about best practices for farmers market vendors. So when we think about selling at a farmer's market, I think it's important, first of all, to define what a farmer's market is and talk a little bit about markets here in Ohio. So we'll do that, talk about some of the benefits, and mainly we're going to focus on strategies of success for you as potential vendors at farmers markets, share some best practices, and then talk about resources that are available to help you be successful. So there's a lot of terms many times used to describe farmers markets, but kind of the official term is farmers S' markets, and that represents those places where a group of vendors come together for a temporary amount of time. Usually that's 3 to 4 hours on a specific day of the week, and then the vendors tear their displays and tents down and they go back to their local businesses and then come back on another weekday or another week for that particular market. And so when we talk about farmers markets, we're really talking about a group of farmers and vendors coming together for a couple hours a day to sell their produce and products directly to consumers. And currently there are about 336 farmers markets identified in Ohio, and that's quite a large number, but Ohio has followed the national trends over the last decade or so where we've seen a real rise in the numbers of farmers markets around the state. So there are many opportunities for those folks looking to sell their local product directly to consumers to choose markets here in Ohio in which to participate. 31% of farmers that sell at farmers markets indicate that that's their only marketing channel to get their product directly to consumers. And 79% of farmers selling at farmers markets indicate that they generate less than $10,000 in annual sales per year. So as we think about the people selling directly to consumers at farmers markets, we really have a lot of small businesses and small producers that are taking advantage of that access directly to consumers so they can capture the largest share of that dollar that they get for that product by going through farmers markets here in Ohio. But I think it's also important to recognize that farmers markets do benefit our communities in which they are located. Of course, they help those small farmers remain viable. And while we think $10,000 a year might not be a huge amount of money, if you stop and think about, the ability to pay the property taxes on the farm, to cover some of the insurance needs that might be needed for that farm, that can really make the difference in a family being able to maintain that farm ground as a family farm as opposed to having to sell that land, which might go into development or other uses. Farmers markets also create jobs, and we really don't stop to think about that as well. But many vendors that sell at farmers markets hire employees to help them with those tasks because, again, if we're small producers, we might be selling at 3 or 4 or multiple farmers markets throughout the week, and there's still all the work that has to be done back at the farm. So it is a way for jobs to be created in local economies. They're also a great source of information to the consumer by helping to provide healthy information about healthy eating, how to use this locally produced fresh produce that we all need to consume more of, and it just really helps then to provide that education and information to consumers to help them improve their eating habits and their health. And then the other thing that many farmers markets do that a lot of folks don't realize is they serve as collection points for local food banks and food pantries. So sometimes at the end of a market day, if particular producers have excess produce that they don't have another ready market for, they will actually donate that produce through the farmers market, and then the farmers markets make arrangements with local food banks and food pantries to take that fresh produce that then goes directly to those food insecure individuals in those local communities. And I think we don't, as a industry, that being the farmers markets, help people understand the value of the produce that we help to provide to food insecure in our communities. They also serve as business incubators, and this is another benefit of farmers markets that can be overlooked sometimes. I know many vendors that have started selling a product out of their home under the cottage food regulations or through their local vegetable or produce stand that they have on their farm, that have gone on to get that feedback directly from consumers, continue to develop their product and services, and have actually opened storefronts in local communities around the state. So that helps again generate revenue for whether they're purchasing or leasing facilities in a community, hiring jobs to help manage that new business in the community, and again another way to provide access to locally produced products for the local citizens of those communities. So that's a great benefit too. Many times also, when a farmer's market is held in a community, the businesses that surround the farmer's market on market day indicate that they benefit that from increased foot traffic and increased sales on market days. So that not only helps the farmer's market, but that helps those surrounding businesses as well. And then finally, farmers markets are also a great access point for, again, folks that may be food insecure in our communities by accepting the Women's, Infants, and Children's Voucher Program. Many markets in Ohio accept the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program benefits, formerly known as the Federal Food Stamp Program. And also here in Ohio, as well as across the country, many markets accept or offer an incentive program for those benefits. So if I'm a food assistance benefit recipient and I go to one of the markets that offers an incentive program, I might spend $10 of my food benefit and that market will match it with another $10, which in effect helps me to double my buying power for fresh local food. That also provides income that goes back to those local farmers and producers to help them maintain their farms and businesses as well. So farmers markets really are a win for everybody involved here in Ohio and across the country. But if you're thinking about exploring selling a product at a farmer's market, you might wonder, well, where do I even begin? I think one of the best things you can do is start where you are and look at the resources that you have available to you and how those might be able to fill a niche within your local market. And so we're going to talk a little bit about exploring potential markets, how to take stock of your resources and set some goals, explore whether this venture is likely to be profitable for you or not, and then plan your crop and decide on which farmers markets might best suit your particular product or service. So one of the things that you can do is visit as many farmers markets as you possibly can. Preferably you'd want to do this the season before you attempt to sell at a farmers market, but with getting close to the start of the market season, it might be where you make conversations and contact with market managers, other vendors that sell at those markets to ask some of your questions. And so you want to look at things like what are currently not being sold at the farmers market that might be an opportunity for you. In addition, you need to think about what can you produce with the resources that you have, whether that's land or equipment or knowledge. Trying to figure out what's currently not available and what you can do to make available can be a win-win situation for you. You also need to think about what rules apply to selling product at a farmer's market. And so there's a couple resources that we'll talk about, but if you are planning to do cottage food production items, jams, jellies, cookies, some breads, then you'll have to follow the Ohio Department of Agriculture's Division of Food Safety cottage food regulations, which we'll talk about more. If you're wanting to sell a product that is something that has to maintain temperature, either maintain the cold temperature of that product, say like eggs or milk, or say that a product that has to be maintained at a hot temperature like a ready-to-eat food, then you're going to have to look at not only the Department of Agriculture depending on your product, but you're going to have to work with your local health department as well to make sure that you are meeting the regulations that are required for those particular products. And so I think, again, if you explore the different farmers markets in your area, the other thing that you need to think as far as those are concerned are what products or items do they allow to be sold at their farmers market. And so maybe you have a great farmers market in your community, and let's say they only offer certified organic produce. Well, if you're not certified organic, then that market may not be the best fit for you. Maybe you have a farmers market where it's 100% producer only, meaning only those items that you yourself produce on your farm can be offered for sale. Some markets around the state allow producer-only products in combination with the ability to work with neighboring farms or producers to help, again, provide the variety and quantity of products that consumers are demanding. So think about the opportunities that are available with the various markets in your area, and then based on the product or service that you're hoping to sell, how the rules, regulations, and the market rules line up with your goals and what you're wanting to do. Again, thinking about federal regulations, we now have the Food Safety Modernization Act, which is coming into play, and so you'll have to think about how that might affect your operation. Of course, that mainly is geared towards fresh produce, but it's something that you need to be aware of and do your homework on to see what of those regulations might apply to your operation. One of the other things that's really important to do is think about what customers are in your local area or visiting that particular farmer's market that you're exploring. What do they want and what do they require? And that can really help you, again, match the best farmers markets in your area with the best products or services that you have to offer directly to that customer. And then again, you'd want to evaluate whether or not those markets accept electronic benefits transfer. As we mentioned, those are actually the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or whether they accept some of the additional food assistance programs that are available throughout Ohio, like the Women's, Infants, and Children's Program or the Senior Farmers Market Nutrition Program, and see if that's an opportunity for you to participate with your products or services as well. In addition to exploring the different markets that are in your area, you also need to think about what resources you currently have available to you. Think of things such as land. What equipment do you have or might have to purchase to produce your particular product? What financial resources do you have? As you know, many times we have expenses in planting crops well before we ever receive a return on the harvest and sales of those products. So where are those financial resources going to come from to help you kind of get through that initial time when you really don't have much income coming in? What knowledge do you have when it comes to growing different products or crops on your particular soil types? And there are many, many decisions that need to go into what crops you're going to plant and how the soil, your experience, your knowledge all go into production of that particular crop. And again, there are many resources out there available to help you with that knowledge. It's just a matter of identifying what items you think you would like to produce and then pursuing some of those resources to make sure you have the best opportunity for success. The other thing that's important to remember as well is what kind of time and energy do you personally have, or the folks involved in your operation have. As we know, farming is difficult tasks. Especially with specialty crop production, we are typically out in inclement weather, whether it's crazy April snow like we're having today, or it's 95 degrees in August and it hasn't rained for 2 weeks. That can take a physical toll on the individuals that are doing that work. So think about if you have the ability to be able to be out in those types of environments on a regular basis to make sure that your crop is well maintained and that you have the ability to have a product to sell. And so once you take stock of all those resources, based on that list that you come up with, you should have a pretty good idea of what products you'd like to produce. Don't try to be everything to everyone, because that can be really difficult. I would start with a few products or vegetables or fruits, whichever that might be. Start relatively small and grow from there. And you will learn what does well in your environment, in your soil type, and what kind of things you enjoy producing and what kind of things that maybe you don't enjoy producing so much. And finally, you'll find out what your customers like and what they want to purchase from you. So you also need to think about some basic questions about your operation. How much of a particular product or multiple products can you produce? And is there sufficient demand by customers for that particular product? And does it have potential to be profitable? Just because we can produce a whole lot of something, if there's too much on the market, it might not be a profitable enterprise for you. So I think it's important to kind of think about what's currently available, what kind of items sell well, and then what has the greatest opportunity to be profitable for your particular operation. Quality is huge. Customers indicate that they shop at farmers markets for the freshness and quality of a product, and so you need to pay special attention to make sure that you are maintaining the highest quality product that you have available. That's not to say that you can't sell subpar quality products at a farmer's market, but if you do so, you need to inform your customers that maybe it's not first quality. So many farmers markets allow second tomatoes to be sold as long as they're properly marked that they are seconds, and customers will buy those for canning or making juice or something like that. That's okay. But again, think about the quality, the profitability potential for your product, and that's really where you really need to think about how successful you might be. Then think about what can you do to add value to that product or service. And one of the things that I argue all the time is that convenience is value to consumers. And so don't underestimate the ability to provide convenience to your customers as well. For example, if you have a family of 4, and maybe you can put together a 4-pack for that family so that when the shopper comes to the farmer's market to purchase sweet corn and tomatoes and green beans and potatoes and whatever you have, instead of that customer having to make those 5 or 6 decisions of those products that they're going to purchase, maybe you can have that family 4-pack ready to go and say, here's your corn and your green beans and your tomatoes and whatever else it is at this single price, and this should last you a week for a family of 4. And that again is a way to help get customers to the market, help them get what they want in a timely manner, and then get them back into their busy lives. The other thing that we need to think about is insurance, and I know that's something a lot of times we don't want to think about, but are you properly insured for what you're doing? And so if you just have a basic homeowner's policy, whether you're doing cottage food production or you have a garden in your backyard, have a conversation with your insurance provider, let them know what you're doing, and make sure that you are properly covered for those activities, because anytime time you start to benefit financially, meaning you're selling a product or service for your financial benefit, you really need to have that conversation with your insurance provider and make sure that you are in fact covered for the activities that you're doing. And then, as we mentioned previously, what regulations apply to the particular products that you hope to produce to sell at the farmers market in your community. And we'll talk a little bit more about resources and where you can find that information. But I do also think it's important to think about the goals. Why do you want to sell at a farmer's market? And many times I focus on the financial aspects, and I don't care if you want to make a couple $1,000s to take your family on a wonderful vacation, or if you're depending on this to help maintain the family farm, it is important that you set some goals. So let's run through an example here. Let's say in this example, you want to generate $10,000 in sales for this season, and you have chosen sweet corn as the crop that you're going to produce on your farm. And so if we just look and kind of walk through that example, if we have $10,000 for the season, the market runs 25 weeks for the season. That means that 10,000 divided by 25 weeks, you're going to have to generate $400 a week to meet your goal. Well, let's assume that you'll sell your sweet corn at $5 a dozen. So if we take that $400 a week, divide it by the $5 per dozen, that means that you need to sell at least 80 dozen ears of sweet corn every week at the market to reach your goal of the $10,000. But what's the problem with that example? Just because the market's open for 25 weeks, does that mean you can produce sweet corn in Ohio for 25 weeks? Probably not. So let's say that you can produce sweet corn for 8 weeks. So if we take the $10,000, we divide that by the 8 weeks, that means you're going to have to generate $1,250 per week, again at $5 a dozen. That means you're going to have to sell 250 dozen ears of sweet corn per week for those 8 weeks to generate your revenue. But let's say you can't, based on your resources, you don't have enough land, you don't have enough equipment, maybe you don't have enough of the financial resources to buy all that seed corn. Let's say you project that you're going to be able to produce 200 dozen per week. So that's actually, if we walk through that example again, that leaves us with a $2,000 shortfall from our $10,000 goal. And so where will that $2,000 remaining dollars come from? So again, I don't think it has to be very complicated, but I think it is important to set some kind of goals for yourself and your operation so that you can use that over time to improve what it is that you're doing at the farmer's market. The other thing that I want to talk about for a minute is pricing. And some people tend to think that maybe $5 a dozen sweet corn is too expensive, and I do understand that it does depend to some extent on what the market will bear and what consumers are willing to pay. But I think it's important that when you're growing a product that you take into account your expenses involved in developing or producing that particular product, and if it is in fact profitable for you. And I would also say from the customer's perspective that pricing is definitely a perception of quality. And we talked about how important quality is to consumers. And so if you're pricing your products too low, customers might think, well, there must be something wrong with that because it's so cheap. And so just really think about how you price your product when you're selling at farmers markets. Again, it's that perception of quality. Don't try to undersell supermarkets. Supermarkets a lot of times, especially with local foods, will offer what we consider loss leaders. So maybe they don't need to make money on that locally produced sweet corn. They're actually selling at a loss to get customers to come into the store and buy other higher margin items. But when you're selling it directly to the customer, you really need to think about what is your profitability for that particular product. And don't reduce prices at the end of the day. I think that can really hurt not only you as a producer, because what does that do? That trains our consumers to come later in the market because they know they're going to get it at a lower price. But that also hurts the market as a whole. I think there are many better options out there, one being donate some of that product or service to a local food bank or food pantry, and that can go a long way to helping boost the farmers market throughout that community. And I had a lady tell me one time, you know you're not charging enough for your product if you sell out too early or no one complains about your price. So just keep that in mind. You work really hard. Don't undervalue your products. So now that you've determined how much product you need to sell directly to reach your goal, and you've explored some markets to determine if they have the ability to help meet your goals, there's some questions I think it's important to ask about the markets that you plan to attend. And one of those is, how many days per week is that market held? Many markets around the state and the country are one-day-a-week markets. And so again, for small operations, if all the markets you explore selling at are only held on Saturday mornings, well, unless you're a whole lot better than some of us that I know, it's very difficult to be in 2 or 3 places at one time. So think about what other opportunities are there. Do you have another family member or an employee that can attend some of those markets for you? How are you going to pick and choose which markets you're going to attend? The other thing to think about is, what's the customer flow at those particular markets? And I know some very small markets that have very supportive and regular customers that come to those markets. And of course, there are other markets throughout the state, especially in the more urbanized areas throughout Ohio, that get thousands of customers to shop on any given day. So you do need to think about the volume of customers that frequent particular markets that you're looking at. You also need to think about what's the cost of attending a particular market or markets in your region. And I will say that there's some research that shows that farmers markets that charge their vendors to participate in that market tend to be more successful and more sustainable over the long term, because they are able to hire at least a part-time manager that makes sure that all the legwork that needs to be done to keep that market running smoothly happens. And so think about that as an investment in your own business by investing in that farmers market as well. Again, things that you need to think about: the cost, not only the fees that the market might charge, but how much does it cost you to get there? Is that market 2 or 3 hours away from your farm, or is that market a half an hour, 15 minutes away from your farm? All of that there is a cost associated with that. And then again, you need to think about your insurance, your product liability insurance, your general liability insurance, and do the markets that you're attending require that? And then when we talk about the transportation of that product as well, does your vehicle or automobile insurance, do you have the proper coverages in place there as well? And so can you attend multiple markets? Is it just you again, or do you have additional members in the operation that can help you do multiple markets? And then, do the customers that come to those markets match your target customer? And that's really a whole nother discussion for another day, but you need to think about the individuals that are selling, or shopping at the farmers markets you're exploring, and how likely they are to purchase your product week after week after week. And so let's say you've done a lot of this planning and research, and you've identified the market or markets that you want to sell at. Now what do you need to do? And so what you'll need to do to sell at a farmer's market, there's a top 10 list that we're going to run through. Of course, you need a table. Most farmers markets don't let you sell out of the back of your pickup truck or your car. You do need a cash box with change, and while many farmers markets accept debit or EBT transactions, many vendors can accept payment via their smartphone. There are still many customers that have that expectation at the farmers market that they pay cash, and so you'll need to be able to make change for that customer that wants to do that. Bags or boxes are something for customers to carry your product home in a convenient manner. Signs, what do you have on your table or at your market booth for sale, and how much does it cost? And we'll talk more about that as well. Any display materials that are helpful to entice customers to come to your market booth and look at and purchase your products. So table covers and business cards and baskets or racks or things that help you display your items on your market booth. And then the other thing you want to think about is product literature, especially if you have some items that are not necessarily mainstream. We do have many people that are interested in trying new foods, and so to help them go ahead and make that decision to try that new item, make sure that you have information there on how to use something, how to store something, and how to maybe freeze that product. It'll help, again, take some of the uncertainness out of the customer's minds and help them purchase your products or service. You also need to include information about your farm and your production practices. Much of the research here recently shows that people, again, another reason they shop at farmers markets is because they want to know who's producing their food, and they also want to know how that food is being produced. And so you can do something like this board on the side here where it's got multiple pictures of this particular farm. Again, it helps that customer almost feel like they visited that farm and have a better understanding of who you are and what exactly you do and how you do it, which again is very important to consumers in today's environment in which we live. The other thing that you would want to do is, if you have the ability, when your market has the ability to accept market tokens, which again are used many times for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. They're also used for incentive programs. You want to make sure that your customers are aware at that market that you do participate in those offerings. You need a tent, typically, although many markets don't require that you have a tent. I will tell you from experience that in July on an asphalt parking lot, it can get rather warm, and so you might want to make sure that you do have a tent, or maybe a sudden rainstorm comes up too and you don't want all your product ruined. So tents are really good. And then a smile. And customers, again, as I mentioned, really want to know who's producing that product, how that product's being produced that they are consuming with their families. And so to be a friendly, smiling face that is happy to offer that information to the customers that are visiting your booth can be very important when you're trying to reach out to customers and sell your particular products or services. And so those are kind of the 10 things you need to actually get to the farmer's market and sell your product. And I just wanted to touch again a little bit on why consumers shop at farmers markets. And this was based on a study that was actually done in 2002. But I think just from the conversations and other studies I've seen, this still really holds true. The top reasons consumers shop at farmers markets is freshness, taste, access to local foods, and then supporting local farms. And I think many times as producers, that second bullet point there, we don't think enough about. People want to know the person that is producing the food that they are serving at their dinner tables or breakfast tables, feeding to their family. It's just such a connection that we have. So don't underestimate the relationship that you can develop with your customers, because they're really craving that as well. And so again, if you're a multiple family member operation and maybe there's one person that's a better people person than another, maybe that's the person that ought to be the face at the farmer's market while the other person is back on the farm growing the wonderful sweet corn that you've decided to produce for your customers. Again, Quality is very important, so you want to make sure that you do maintain the quality and consistency of your product all the way from production, from the field to the farmer's market to the customer taking it home. Can't tell you how many times I've heard people say that when you buy your tomatoes, don't take them home and put them right in the refrigerator. Leave them setting on the counter. Once you've sliced them, then you need to think about putting them in the refrigerator, just because they taste so much better. And again, we want our customers to have that fresh, high quality, excellent experience with our local product. Ask your customers for feedback. When you see them the next week, say, hey, what did you think of that tomato? Or what did you think of that sweet corn? And be willing to listen to the customers and accept their feedback. And while we really have a passion typically of producing this local food product, be ready to listen to your customers. So if there is an issue that you hear multiple times from different customers, maybe there's something happening in your operation that you need to take a really good look at and make sure that you correct any problems that you might have within the business. And then if you do have quality issues, have a plan in place to deal with that. As we know, weather can wreak havoc on fresh produce. I know, producer, that one year there was a hailstorm that happened to just go right across their farm. And they had to take the time to explain to customers that, well, there's all these little dings in the product, and this is why. It was from the hail that we had to go through. I try to help them understand that it's not the quality you would like to put out there either. And of course, typically if it's damaged like that, you'd probably want to discount the price on it as well. But you still can work with your customers and help them feel like they're helping sustain your farm. That makes the customers feel good as well. So have a plan in place to deal with any of those quality issues that might arise. And then train your employees. If you have employees that represent your farm, whether it's at the farm or at the farmer's market, please take the time to train those employees. I've visited many farmers markets around the state, and one of the questions I heard one day was, do you guys spray this product? And the person working the tent, obviously to me, was an employee, because they're like, I don't know, I just come to the farmer's market. And so that's not really very helpful for anybody. So train your employees on how you want them to deal with customers, because they are representing you, and what story you want to tell to customers on your farm and your production practices. All very important for your operation. Design displays to be eye-catching. You know, one of the things that we hear about farmers markets all the time is that we need to show that abundance and we need to show that quality. And I just really love the picture here. And believe it or not, this is just a clip art photo from Microsoft Word. But I thought that was the prettiest basket of produce. And who could resist walking by that at the farmer's market? And so maybe, again, this is your family pack and you have one basket on your table that represents, this is our family pack for the week, and it's got all those vegetables in it, and oh, by the way, it's one price, and the customer says, I'll take it, and you grab the bag that's already been pre-packaged and hand that off to them, and they're on their way. But that beautiful display got them to stop and look at your products or services. Again, signage is very important, and they must have prices. As customers, we do not want to feel like we're intruding or that we don't know what's going on, and especially at farmers markets, customers are very hesitant to ask the price of a product, so make sure that you do display prices prominently at your farmers market stand. Again, quality, quality, quality. I think I've said that enough. Educate your customers on how to use the product. Don't put your basil in the refrigerator. It will turn it dark. And things like that. And then try to develop that relationship and interaction with your customers and ask them what other items they might be interested in purchasing from you. What's currently not available locally that they would love to have. And they can be a really good source of information and ideas for your particular operation. So talk to your customers and get their feedback as well. There we go. And so again, we want to create that abundance. We want to create that quality. So be creative with your market booth. I love the way they kind of built this tower of sweet corn. Again, what customer could resist walking by and looking at that beautiful sweet corn? And then you can see the table is full of that sweet corn so they can take it home and have it for their dinner that day. Pile it high and watch it fly. That's another saying that we hear a lot throughout farmers markets. People really want to know that you're good at what you do. And so this beautiful display of radishes, it looks abundant. It looks just quality radishes. And again, it entices customers to come over, look at your product, and grab a bunch of radish to take home with them that day. Use a color for eye appeal. I really like this example too, where we have both the red and white potatoes, but instead of putting the red all in one place and the white all in the other, they've switched them and alternated the colors. And again, it just makes for a great eye-catching display as customers are walking through there. Again, I mentioned tables, and we do need tables to display our product. I like the fact that there's a table cover on this table, because that way you can hide stuff under your table, whether it's extra boxes or extra product, those kinds of things, and the customer doesn't necessarily see that. So table covers that help accent your display are very helpful as well. Layers can really help, again, your display look more abundant and draw the customer's eyes in. So if you see here in this picture, we have one layer of baskets at one level, and then right behind that, they've actually taken an empty basket, turned it upside down, and set another basket on top of it, which again just adds that eye appeal to that particular display with those beautiful fresh vegetables that they have. And notice they all have signs with prices in those products. The other thing to think about is aroma. Use aroma. I can just imagine the smell of fresh peaches as I look at this picture, and the plums, and it looks like maybe nectarines as well. So what a great way to, again, help customers just reach out with their nose and look at those products through the aroma, and use that to your advantage if you have that ability. Again, I mentioned the signage. Make sure that it is effective and easily informs customers. So here's some examples. Yes, we accept those market tokens. Yes, we accept the WIC vouchers, and this is who we are and what we offer. They offer those heirloom vegetables. And so again, signage can be very effective, and customers are hesitant to ask. If you have never sampled your products, sampling sells your products, and I encourage you to explore that option as well. Keep in mind that you may need to work with your local health department and make sure that you're using best sampling practices. And there's actually a whole bulletin that's been developed by the University of Kentucky on best sampling practices at farmers markets. You can just Google that and help you make sure that you're doing that in a safe manner as well. But I highly encourage you to sample your products, because if a customer puts that good quality product in their mouth through a sample, they're probably going to buy some and take it home with them. Again, I mentioned every product needs a price. So as we look at this particular example here, we see different types of peppers, but each type of pepper has a sign with the price. And while they're all $2.50, it looks like a pint. Again, customers don't want to ask that question, so make it easy for them to understand what those products are, so that you can see the various types of peppers across through there, and that the price for each of the pints. Again, very easy to communicate with that with customers with a sign. And this particular example, the farm even put their logo on their signage, which I love, because that again just helps tie that customer to you. And another thing I'd like to point out is one of the ways that we can do signage very easily for our farmers markets is take that card and then have it laminated, and then we can use those wax pencils to write the price on the cards. Again, sometimes in the early season you might be able to ask for a little bit higher price if you're first to a market with a product, or maybe you don't want to have to remake your cards every year, and that's just a great way that you can do that and make sure that you are communicating that effectively with your customers. There we go. Again, we want to encourage customer loyalty, and as the research has shown, they want to know you. They want to know how you're producing their food. Again, use those visual aids to help customers visit your farm and to talk about your production practices, who all's involved in your operation, and where you're located. And then educate your customers. And one of the great ways that farmers markets have been able to do that is they offer cooking demonstrations, whether that's through a local professional chef or whether that's somebody in the market that loves to cook and shares easy tips for how to produce product or how to prepare products at that farmer's market. That's a great way, and customers tend to love those cooking demonstrations. And then in addition to that, provide the health and nutrition information along with that. Invite your customers back. Let them know what's coming in the next week or two. You know, we always hear, when are we going to have fresh tomatoes? When are we going to have sweet corn? So signage can really help you create that excitement and say, next week we're going to have this. So help support the market and again, invite customers to come back, create that anticipation about what's coming next. Again, add that customer service in for your shoppers at your farmer's market, whether it's holding packages until they're ready to leave the market so they don't have to walk all around the market with that watermelon or cantaloupe. Take orders ahead of time. Maybe your products are somewhat limited based on your customer demand. Can they call you the day before and then hold it so they can be picked up at the farmer's market? That might work for you and your customers. And then really look at the presentation, your display, and yourself from your customer's point of view, and make sure that it's in a welcoming environment and encourages people to come and purchase your products at the farmer's market. So, there are many resources out there that can help you take advantage of some of the knowledge and the research that's already been conducted and some of the best practices that have been identified. Take advantage of those resources. We're here to help you be successful. And so again, our direct food and agricultural marketing program, our web address is there at southcenters.osu.edu/marketing. We have many resources there that can help you think about that and learn about developing your customer profile and best marketing practices as well. And then there's also the Farmers Market Management Network here in Ohio. It is a state association of farmers markets throughout the state. It's a great resource for you to network with other farmers market vendors and other managers, farmers market managers throughout the state. And you can find information on their website as well to help you be successful. And then there are additional resources through the United States Department of Agriculture's Agricultural Marketing Service. Again, we mentioned the Ohio Department of Agriculture and their Division of Food Safety. They also have the Ohio Proud program, which helps you with your marketing of your Ohio-grown products. And the Farmers Market Coalition is another one I wanted to mention. It's a national organization that represents or advocates, for farmers markets across the country. And they just have a wealth of information on their website that can help you with all aspects of selling at a farmer's market as well as managing a farmer's market. And then finally, many of the images that I shared today in this presentation actually came from a program that was supported by USDA's Agricultural Marketing Service called Shared Wisdom, Selling Your Best at Farmers Markets. And that is available if you contact USDA as well, if you'd be interested in that. And then finally, my name, Christy Welch, Direct Marketing Specialist with the Ohio State University Extension. And my email address, if there's anything that we can do to help you be successful at farmers markets throughout Ohio, please be sure to contact us and we'll be happy to provide assistance.